Okay.
Yes.
So last time, firstly, happy Diwali.
Yes, happy Diwali to you as well. Thank you.
We had a great party yesterday. We all went to sleep at 1 or 2 o'clock. The rest carried on till 5 in the morning.
I thought as much, and that's why I was wondering whether you will be awake or fresh enough and you'd like to have a meeting, or you would continue to enjoy the glow of Diwali.
Anyway, so we'll talk. I was talking last time about Sikkim, and we'll continue with that. Just a second. You know, earlier I'd spoken to you about a lot of plants growing on those mountains, and I think I mentioned some name to you, maybe gladuli or something, but it's not right. What grows there in high altitude is rhododendron. So rhododendron is a very involved system of roots and very pretty flowers. They grow up to 11,500 feet. You see? So then when you go in North Sikkim, along the Tista Valley or along the other valley, which leads to Dongtala Pass from the south to the north, the hillsides are a riot of color in certain seasons. Very steep hills, but a riot of color. A very fascinating geography. Now, I told you last time that while my wife Rupi and I had been away to Sikandarabad for a Major General's meeting, Major General and Equivalent Air Force and Navy, on administration and things like that. It was a discussion come seminar. The Karmapa, who was in Rumtek Monastery, passed away. And I told you that when I came back to Sikkim, the governor informed me, Governor Mr. Talyar Khan had been invited for the funeral ceremony of the Karmapa. And he described this to me. He said, because the governor had a lot of appointments, he asked the people in the monastery as to what would be the good time when he should come. So they said 12 o'clock noon would be about the time that the funeral would start. So he arrived at 12 o'clock at noon, and he expected that the whole thing should be over in about half an hour. But they kept on doing those Tibetan dances, playing those long Tibetan, what do you call it, a horn sort of thing. It's a long thing which rests on the ground at one end, and you blow into that, it makes a deep sort of sound. And the monks were dancing. Their dancing is not fast, it's a slow movement with all sorts of steps, balancing on one leg and all that. And he described, he said, he asked people that, half an hour has passed, and now almost 1 hour has gone, and we haven't started the ceremony. So they said, we are waiting for the sign. So everybody had to wait for the sign. So there was no timing to this. It was a clear blue sky, no cloud. Normally there's a lot of rain in Sikkim for about almost 10 months in the year. But here, since it was the middle of the autumn, blue sky, beautiful sun shining, and everybody is quite comfortable. Then, instead of 12, at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there came a full rainbow from one end of the sky to the other end of the sky. There were no clouds and no rain. So when the rain came, they said, yes, that's the sign. And they did the ceremony of funeral. Funeral, the high-powered Buddhist monks are put in the lotus position, and they are buried like that. They are not burnt, because they say that the body does not deteriorate of a person who is advanced in spiritual knowledge. Very interesting point, which I thought I might like to tell you about the Karmapa Lama. He's dead and gone. Another young lad has come from Tibet, who says he is the reincarnation of the Karmapa, but he's not accepted by the Rinpoche in Rumtek monastery near Gangtok. So the Rinpoche, that means number 2, is looking after that Gompa, And the boy who came saying he's a reincarnation, he is with the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala. Now, while I was commanding the division, I got a call that the army chief wants me to accompany him for a visit abroad. So that was General Krishna Rao. So I had to go to Delhi, make sure that I had the correct uniforms with all the glad rags, the ceremonial uniforms and so on. And within a few days after my arrival, we left for the army chief's party. It comprised him, his wife, his staff officer from his own headquarters, and myself as an additional officer he's allowed to take with him by government hukum. And we had to go to Yugoslavia. Now, Yugoslavia no longer exists. But Yugoslavia, if you look at Italy, on the east of Italy, the Adriatic Sea. And contiguous to that was the erstwhile Yugoslavia, now broken into 5 or 6 states. There's Slovenia in the north, and there's Bosnia-Herzegovina, and there's Serbia, and so on. They're broken into 4 or 5 states. So when we went there, it was still one state. Now, we had to first fly to Rome, where we had to change aircraft. We had to spend a whole day at Rome. And when we arrived in Rome, the Roman army the Italian army had sent a major general as a liaison officer from the cavalry. Very smart man with high boots and, a cane for horse riding. Cavalry officer. And he took us to his cavalry mess, which is from the airport about an hour and a half's run. And we spent the time there. And their cavalry mess, like any of our Indian armored corps units, you go, they're very dolled up messes and things. But in his case, there were actual horses. They had tanks also, but there were actually horses there in the mess, with huge fields where they could train on horseback as well as on tanks. And a very well set up mess with a lot of cavalry, sort of, for instance, bar stools at the bar were all saddles. So you got into the bar stool, it's like riding a horse, with stirrups on both sides, and you rest your feet on that, and you can have your drink. We spent the day there, then we took the flight, a night flight, and we landed in Serbia. We spent about, I think, 5 days or 6 days, meeting there various military officials, and we came to know, I really assessed that some of the states were not very happy, which Serbia is the biggest state. Serbia has got a capital called Belgrade. And they are Slav people. They're like the Russians. They speak Russian also. And they are very pro-Russia also. And when you go to Bosnia-Herzegovina, there are more Muslim type of population there. We've been captured by the Ottoman Turks at some time. They're very good-looking people. And we had a very good-looking lady taking us around. Sarajevo is the name of the place. It's in the hills. He even took us to the bridge where World War I started by the assassination of the Archbishop, what's his name? Not Archbishop, but the Archduke of Austria. He was shot dead by a terrorist while he was crossing that bridge in his carriage in 1914. And that was the beginning of the World War I. You see? So it's an interesting history in Serbia. Everybody respected Marshal Tito. I don't know if you've heard this name. Tito was a guerrilla leader, and he, during World War II, assisted the Allies against Germany. Germany had conquered this area, but he was a guerrilla leader fighting against the Germans. He managed to get all these Balkan states. When you hear Balkanization, means breaking up. So the Balkan states, as they are known as, together and created the country of Yugoslavia. He ruled extremely well himself as the president. Everybody appreciated him and followed his orders, and that was the state. Now he had died, so there is his mausoleum, etc. We went there and treated with great respect by everybody. Now there, in the political system, the president is the boss, you see, and Tito was the boss for life. Tito, if you recollect, was a friend of Jawaharlal Nehru, our prime minister, in the 50s, and also the president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was a colonel, had taken over the Egyptian country, became president of Egypt. So these three, along with certain states of Africa, like Nigeria and others, had got together to create the non-aligned movement. Now, the non-aligned movement is that you're neither not on the side of the Soviet Union in those days, nor on the side of the United States and the Western world. You're sitting on the fence, trying to get the goodies from both sides. That was the beginning of the non-aligned movement, and you will understand that though that is no longer functional, the present policy that India is following is similar. I mean, you're on friendly with the Russians, you're also friendly with the Americans and others. See, so the non-aligned movement was Marshal Tito, a very important person who assisted in starting that movement. Now, when Tito died, he was a president for life, so he had total power. But he laid down an order that only the president has to be selected in turn from each of the 4 or 5 states comprising Yugoslavia. And that the president would have a tenure of only 1 year. And then after he's finished, the next state's senior man would be president, and the third state, then fourth state, every 1 year to be changed. So the first president was elected from Serbia. But by the time he finished his tenure of 1 year, he refused to part with the power, which had to go to Bosnia-Herzegovina, because he said they are half Muslim and they're terrorists, and we're not going to let them take the power of the whole state. So that caused the Balkan Wars, which eventually broke up all these states. So Slovenia became separate, and Bosnia-Herzegovina became separate, and Serbia became separate. And there are not recollecting the other names. They became 5 states, 5 different states. So that was a visit with the army chief, and I got to know the army chief very well. Now, when we came back to India, within 2 weeks, we were having in Gangtok what is known as the Black Cat Day. You know, sign is the Black Cat, and so the Black Cat Day is the annual raising day of the division. There are huge parties to be laid on with a lot of arrangements made for guests and so on. So Suki was telling me, when are you coming back? But the chief wouldn't let me go from Delhi. But I had to write his report. So I wrote his report very fast, but he's such a busy man. He was not able to give it time. And so whenever he would read it, he would read a bit, give some directions, which I would incorporate. And then I used to wait for another week or 2 before he got time again to talk to me. With the result, I was stuck in Delhi for almost a month, twiddling my thumbs, wondering what to do next. But I did walk around some of the corridors of the South Block, as it is known as, where you have got the army headquarters, the naval headquarters, and you've got the defense headquarters of the defense minister. And further down the line, you've got the foreign ministry and so on. So walking these corridors, from the basement upwards, there are 3 stories. It takes enough time to exercise and at the same time to find out where all these hundreds of passages go. So during the 65 war, you recollect, I was on the staff of the army chief, but I didn't have time to reconnoiter the passages of the South Block. So I used my time to call on certain officers and get to know who's what and what sort of work they do. Eventually, the Black Cat Day came, and I couldn't attend, so Subuki had to run the whole show herself, and she did it extremely well. The National Defense College, which is a senior training institution of 1 year for brigadier level officers, which I told you I had attended before I became PGS of 2 Corps, before I became a general, the brigadier at that time. So they were visiting. They decided to visit Gangtok and Sikkim. So they expected me to be there to take them around. But since I wasn't there, Rupi had to do that together with my two officers who were my grade 1 staff officers on the operations branch and the administrative branch. So they took them around. And but I had this experience of going with an army chief's official visit to a foreign country, which I think we made a lot of friends in Yugoslavia. We got to know a lot of the reasons why the breakup and things are likely to take place, and I was not surprised when the breakup actually took place a few years after our visit. There was, for instance, an ambassador in Delhi who became a very good friend who belonged to Slovenia. And we became good friends even when I was the chief. So this is the question of the trip abroad to Yugoslavia. There was Kanchenjunga, the great mountain of Sikkim, which is half in Nepal and half in Sikkim. Tourists used to come to just see it. So there were two viewpoints. One was in Gangtok itself, a certain position on the road to Chontang, where if you went early hours of the morning, you could see the Kanchenjunga mountain with two clear peaks. There are two peaks, one is slightly higher than the next, and there's a ridgeline connecting. And the other viewpoint is in Darjeeling, where you have to get up at about 4 in the morning and go to the viewpoint from which the Kanchenjunga is just one peak, because you see it from the south rather than from the east. And it's a conical hill like that. The thing to see here, it goes so high, is that when the sun rises, when it's absolutely dark everywhere else, the first ray of sunlight hits the top of this peak. And before it hits the dark mountain, which is shining white because of the snow and the ice on it, so even during darkness, you see the shining white of the mountain in darkness. And as the sun starts coming up over the horizon, you can't see the sun yourself because it's below the horizon as far as you're concerned. The mountain color changes from dark gray to purple and slightly red and something like that as the diffused light of the sun comes on it. And then when the first ray of sun hits the peak, it hits the peak and then very rapidly goes down. You can see the light going down the spurs on the eastern side of Kanchenjunga. So the Himalayan Mountaineering Institution, which trains our mountaineers to climb mountains, used to climb the Sikkim hills and even climb Kanchenjunga. They had a lot of relations with 17 Mountain David, where I was, because we give them the support in case something goes wrong. We've got helicopters and we've got mountaineers ourselves, and many of our pickets in very high altitude. So if there's a problem with the mountaineering team, we can supply helicopters for medical evacuation and that sort of thing. Or if their supplies fail or something, we can drop supplies for them. If there's a casualty amongst them, we can lift the casualty and bring it back to a hospital. So since we are very much concerned, my division was for the mountaineering from the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute in Darjeeling. I was also invited for the Silver Jubilee. Now the Silver Jubilee was held on a certain day. And so I also landed up from Gangtok to the Darjeeling area, which is just north of the Bengal Plains, for this show. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. So she was also invited. Jyoti Bosu was the Chief Minister of Bengal. So he was also invited because that is Bengal territory. And so we had these big shots there. And after the briefing by the HMI, or the Himalayan Mountaineering Institution. There was a nice tea served and so on. And we were all having a cup of tea. And I must tell you something about Indira Gandhi, who was supposed to be a very hard taskmaster and a prime minister who could be very nasty with some of her bureaucrats and others, and some of her politicians. I found her standing alone with a cup of tea because nobody wants to go anywhere near the hard taskmaster type of prime minister. So I walked across, I introduced myself, and she knows everything. But what would I call it? Besides being a boss, to have the feminine wiles of getting a military officer under her thumb in 2 seconds. So, General, you're commanding the division, tell me about that, and what do you think about this, and what do you think about that, and listening to me with great attention what I had to say about the politics and about the Chogyal and about this, that, and the other. Very charming, very soft, very nice. And it was a great pleasure to talk to her for about 10 minutes while we had a cup of tea. Then the story goes that everybody repaired for the night and she was staying in a hotel. She decided to go to the viewpoint to see Kanchenjunga during the early hours of the morning. So there was nobody ready to accompany her. So she had her own staff officers. And so they arranged the visit. And we came to know, since I was still there, that the Prime Minister was going to leave at about 4 in the morning, unaccompanied by any particular high person, but with her staff to go to the viewpoint and see Kanchenjunga. So the story goes from ADCs and others whom I knew that at 4 o'clock in the morning when she stepped out of her room, Jyoti Bosu was standing there. Now there was a big quarrel going on politically between Jyoti Bosu and Indira Gandhi. Because Indira Gandhi wanted a Congress government. Therefore, the answer was how to get rid of this long-lasting Chief Minister of Bengal, Jyoti Bosu, who was too clever by half to get kicked out too easily. All sorts of stuff. So for instance, you had the problems of the Gurkha National Front in Darjeeling and others, all against the Bengal government. Everybody knew that there was a lot of political fight going on, where the Congress party at the center was trying its bit to dislodge the authority of Jyoti Bosu so that she vacate the office and maybe a congressman would take it over. But he was standing outside, and he's a very pleasant man. I don't know if you know. And he said, come on, Indira, I'll accompany you. Took her hand and walked her up to the viewpoint and explained every detail of what she should see and how she should see it and what are the interesting portions about this. Which showed that at the private level, no matter the fight that takes place in the press and in the parliament between a party in power and a party not in power or in opposition, despite that, the personal equations between those two individuals may be very close, may be very good. Yeah. I don't know if I told you probably a little earlier in this series, before I took over command of my regiment, I was only a major. And I happened to be in Calcutta, and I remind you, I was invited by Major General Santokh Padda, the Armored Corps officer, who was the Chief of Staff of Fort William in Calcutta, for evening drink with my wife. And I did that. And the gentleman, Jyoti Bosu, came in with, I mean, I didn't know who he was. He was introduced as Mr. Bosu. So I was introduced as Major Sharma. And was asked what Lutrek. He says, what's the major having? So I said, I'm having a scotch on the rocks. So he said, I'll have the same. So we sat chairs and we're drinking. So I asked him, I said, Mr. Bosu, what do you do for a living? So he said, well, I enjoy my life, but in my spare time, I'm the Chief Minister of Bengal. So I said, you don't look like a communist chief minister because you're dressed beautifully with a coat and tie and plus fours, swagger cane and a pipe. See? I said, no, you don't look like a communist. He said, well, I'm off duty at the moment. You should see me when I'm on duty, I look like a communist. So that's an interesting fact about Jyoti Bosu. I had much more dealings with him when I became an army commander. He was still the chief minister. Now, as far as Ruby is concerned, she used to attend some of the discussions about tourism in Sikkim. Now, governor and the chief minister were very keen to start good tourism with lovely places to see. And tourism brings in a lot of money for hotels and so on and so forth. And so she attended some of these conferences and she knew so much about it and so many good ideas about the subject that she was present when Mr. Sidhu, who was the top bureaucrat for tourism in government of India, he later became governor of Goa also. Mr. Sidhu arrived in Gangtok for a week to discuss aspects of tourism and so on. And he appointed Surubi as the consultant for tourism in Sikkim. There's orchids and best of flowers in the whole country. You can't get flowers like that. The orchids, for instance, as you get in Sikkim, and there's good export material for that, and there's lovely places to see, and so on. And there are occasions where she has been in Rajnavas, as is known, because it's the lieutenant governor's setup, where she's giving talks and lectures to the rest of the Sikkimese bureaucracy and the governor and the chief minister as to certain aspects of arranging tourism. We have some photographs of that, and one of these days we might send to you. It's very interesting because she really was the boss, and as far as tourism is concerned. And when she lectured, I mean, it was like a teacher training a little class of youngsters as to how to get about the business. There's also a very interesting man who was the Chief Justice of Sikkim, Mr. Justice Gujral by name. And he and I became very friends because I was the head of the army, he was the head of the law. And there's not much of law going on there. It's a very small set of courts. But nonetheless, he was the Chief Justice. We got to know them very well. And he also used to follow some of my views. For instance, when the instruction that we must not call on the Chogyal, which I described a little earlier, he had also got those instructions. So we were having a drink together one day, and next day was a Chogyal's major party. And both of us had got invitations with our wives. He asked me, General, are you going for this? Because there are instructions that we can't go. I said, look, I am going. And I suggest you don't bother about idiotic instructions. You go to, you're the Chief Justice, who can say anything to you? So he said, yes, okay. So both of us went. So with the result, we became very friendly. And that friendship continued well after the time when I'd left Sikkim and even retired. And so he retired judicial officer. So now I had my nephew come and visit us. He's my elder brother, Lieutenant General V N Sharma's son, Gautam Shonik. He was in the academy and he was about to pass out. And he had to give his choice of which organization of the army he would like to join. So he sent me a message from the IMA, Indian Military Academy in Dehradun, to say he'd like to come and spend 2 weeks with me in Sikkim. So I said, certainly you come along. So he came. So he said to me, what do you think I should join? I said, what do you want to join? He said, well, I'm thinking of joining the mechanized infantry. But I have a huge letter of 8 or 9 pages written on both sides by my father, trying to tell me why I should join the engineers. Because the engineers have a technical knowledge, very superior knowledge, and by the time they leave the military, they are very much in demand in all civil organizations which require engineering and companies who do engineering work. So the idea here was that if you have, when you leave the army, depending on what age, etc., you leave, you've got a very good, attractive civil job waiting for you. So it's better to do that. He asked me, what do you think? I said, look, I'm a soldier. I'm not bothered about what happens after I retire. And I've joined the Armored Corps, and nobody wants an Armored Corps officer because you know how to shoot very well and how to talk too much and how to run our battle the way we want to do. And we don't bother as to what happens after you retire. And I said, but my view is that mechanized infantry is neither infantry nor tanks. So either join the infantry or join the tanks, because mechanized infantry means that you are riding a tracked vehicle. And once you're riding a tracked vehicle, you don't feel like getting off. You see? So I sent him to my attachment to two of my good battalions. I had two very good battalions there. I had four parachute regiment, commanded by a chap called Lieutenant Colonel Balsara, top class unit. And I had 2nd, 4th Gurkha Rifles, commanded by Rajiv Yadav, top class unit. In fact, out of 9 battalions in my division, whenever we had divisional competitions, hundreds of competitions of field firing, competitions of tactics, competitions on high altitude work, competitions of bands, competitions of route marches into the high altitude area, how fast to do it, and acclimatization, etc., and field firing and shooting. These were the two battalions tussling against each other to come first or second. So I told Gautam, I said, you attach here, learn how to fire all these weapons also. I told the battalion commander, let's put the chap through his paces. So he was given a lot of training. So then he decided to join the tank corps at the end. Because I said, either join the tanks or join the infantry. Don't be halfway measures. So Tindi's son joined the army, didn't join the engineers, much to the disgust of his father. But nonetheless, when a person wishes to do something, it's no point in forcing a young man to do what you want. You have to really extract from him what he wants and then advise accordingly. And I follow that principle all the time, because what happens is that I think many people want to live their lives through their children. They want the children to do something that they were not able to do, or something that they wanted to do and could not do. That's not the way to go. You have to give freedom to the child to develop his own ideas on the subject, but you discuss it out with him and give the advice as a friend rather than as a father or as an uncle or a senior member of the family. Sikkim had many lessons, because many times